Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how I made this spline jig. It has a T-track so you could adjust your stop lock, and it also slides on the tracks of your table saw. I like to make most of my jigs small and compact since I don't have a whole lot of space in my shop. This jig is only 12 by 9 inches, but it's more than capable of handling most of the boxes I'll be making. So hang out for a bit and I'll show you how I made it.
I started by cutting the pieces for the cradle at 5.5 inches. These dimensions are pretty arbitrary, but I did make the overall length 12 inches. I set my blade to exactly 45 degrees using a digital angle gauge and ran both pieces through. I then set my dado stack to cut a 3/4 inch groove at a depth of 3/8 of an inch. These are the dimensions for the T-track I'm going to install. The exact placement isn't important. Just make sure you're cutting the slot on the correct side. Now I'm cutting the support blocks. I cut these at 2 3/4 of an inch square. I used my cross-cut sled and a speed square to get a perfect 45-degree angle. I made these cuts very slowly since I was only using one clamp to hold it down and I didn't want the block to pivot and possibly shoot it at me. You want to make sure you dry fit all your pieces just to make sure you're at 45 degrees. I used the frame of a combination square to check, and I was dead on. Once I was ready, I began gluing the supports to the cradle, and I used brad nails to hold it in place. At this point, I'm only gluing the supports to the cradle and not to the base, but I am using the base to keep the pieces aligned. Then I repeated the process for the other wing of the cradle and checked to make sure they were squared. I drew a center line to use as reference as I clamped down the cradle. I added some brad nails to hold it in place. Then I did the same thing for the other wing of the cradle. Then I moved on to the T-track. Some T-tracks come with holes pre-drilled, but these didn't. These were a lot cheaper, so I didn't mind drilling my own holes. I'll put a link in the description in case you want to check them out. Make sure you countersink them so your T-bolt doesn't get blocked by the screws. I probably went a little crazy with the holes. I think I could have gotten away with 4 screws and some CA glue. Next, we'll add the rails. I placed some washers in the slots to raise the rails. This raises them enough to make contact with the base. Normally you add CA glue to one piece and spray the activator to the other piece. I didn't spray the activator just to have a couple extra seconds to properly lay down the base. I used the fence as a guide. Off camera, I ran screws through the rails to secure them. I also ran screws through the supports just to add some strength. The saw blade I normally use is an ATB or alternate top bevel. This type of blade cuts sort of a V-groove, which will leave a small gap in your splines. So I swapped out my blade for a 20-tooth flat top blade. As the name suggests, it'll leave a nice flat cut for your splines to sit on. Now it's time to cut the slot. Make sure you don't cut all the way through. It will stay together if you do, but I like having the back piece for extra support. Here I'm using a stop block I made for my crosscut sled and a machinist square to square up the block. Eventually I'll make a stop block specifically for this spline jig. And here goes the first cut. I used painter's tape when I was gluing up this box, which worked out perfectly to reduce tear out, even though I was using a brand new blade. After cutting all the corners, you can just flip the box to get the same distance from the edge on the opposite side. Then, cut all 4 corners. I then adjusted my stop block to make my center splines, and I cut all 4 corners. And there you have it, perfectly cut slots for your splines. This is the finished box. I ended up using walnut splines to add some contrast, which I'll show on a separate video. So please consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll be sure to show you more videos like this one. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next one.